How's it going, everybody? This is Philip Caldwell coming at you again for the fffaceoff.com metrics that matter videos. If you are unfamiliar with this, hit up the link in the website or in the comments right below, fffaceoff.com. Our suite of tools and fantasy metrics and everything like that is all free to use and some of the best stuff that you can find. I highly recommend it. And I got a pretty interesting query this week. They asked me to look at Najee Harris versus Tony Pollard, and I thought that would be a great way to dive into our player analysis tool, our backfield usage tool, and of course we're going to hit up my consistency score, my favorite, my baby. All right, before we go too much further, let's just jump right into Najee Harris. We got this is the player analysis tool. One of my favorite dashboards right up here because we get to see all of the stuff, all in nice, all of the good fantasy nuggets right in one spot. It's really helpful, I think. We got our consistency score right off the bat, 3.11. That ranks 19th among all running backs. Not great, but not horrible. We got 11.5 fantasy points per game, but that, I believe, is a bit misleading. We got a median score of 8.8. That, I think, is far more telling. We'll get into that in just a little bit. We've also got our fantasy points per rush attempt. 0.69 ranks 121st among all running backs. Not good. We've got fantasy points per target, 4.02, which ranks 24th. That is lovely. I really like seeing that for Najee Harris, except for the only problem is he doesn't get a whole lot of targets. That might change with Russell Wilson, of course, but right now that's yet to be seen. We've also got our fantasy points scored by opponent, which I think is really interesting because here we can see, he's kind of going up against cupcake defenses here with Las Vegas being his best fantasy output so far on the season. New York Jets, that's not necessarily cupcake, that's the second best, but everybody else, Los Angeles Chargers, Indianapolis, Dallas, Denver, Atlanta, all under 15 fantasy points per game. Again, this is half-point PPR scoring. Seeing that 8.8, which is the median score, by the way, was against the Indianapolis Colts, which I can probably get 8.8 fantasy points running against, is a little worrisome. Here we got his actual stat lines for the season: 478 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, 14 receptions, 135. So see, this is what I'm saying. Like 14 receptions is just not a lot 7 weeks in. So even though he's got a good fantasy points per target, he's just not getting the targets. That's worrisome. Now we've got the fantasy points scored per week. You can see that median line of 8.8. Again, if you're not terribly familiar with what median means, basically that is the point at which all the rest of the distributions are right above or right below. So it is truly the middle of his fantasy output. I think that is far more telling of what we can actually expect from him on a week-to-week basis. Is that median fantasy points, and in this case, 8.8 for Najee. Not great. We can see though that his best 2 performances has been the last 2 weeks, so that is something important to notice. But I'm still a little bit worried about that median. I can't let that one go. Before we go too much further with Najee analysis, let's take a look at Tony Pollard's page. We got a consistency score here, 3.25. That ranks 16th among running backs. 12.6 fantasy points per game. Median, 15.75. Now that is something really that I really like. I like seeing that median above that 15 point. We've got a 0.8 rush attempt, fantasy points per rush attempt, which ranks 91st among all running backs. That is much better. We've got 3.02 fantasy points per target, which ranks 40th among running backs. Not great, but if we go down here, 18 receptions. So a few more than Najee, but not a whole ton more. That's a little worrisome, but that's all right. Fantasy points scored by opponent. We got Miami, 17.8. Chicago, 16.9. That is no easy going there. Indianapolis, here we go, 16.3. That's what you need to see against Indianapolis. New York Jets, 15.2. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the New York Jets are softer rush defense than I realized. Buffalo, 7.5. Woof. And Green Bay, 4.4. Now we can see the fantasy points by week. It's a little bit more spread out here, obviously, but that median, again, makes me a lot happier. And if you look, yes, the 2 weeks where he scored below the median, it's really far below, yes. But look at how close that median line is to week 1, week 2, week 4, week 6. I think this is far more telling of what we can actually expect out of Tony Pollard on a week-to-week basis. All right, let's go ahead and check out the backfield usage. We've got 446 total team snaps for the running backs in Pittsburgh, which ranks 10th. That is, great. We all know if you don't, you're brand new to fantasy football, but clearly volume is king when it comes to running backs. And so when we see that the Pittsburgh Steelers are basically have their running backs out on the field the 10th most of any other offense, that is great. That's good to see. We got Najee Harris is the purple right here. He's clearly the leader of the pack, but what I am noticing is Jaylen Warren's back, right? He was here week 1, week 2, and then we didn't see him for a few weeks. Now we're seeing him again creep into that snap share with Najee. So, week 6, his first week back, Najee had 31 out of 56. Next week, he's got 33 out of 68. So clearly, Jaylen Warren is getting more of the work. Najee Harris has 59.04% of the total team snaps, 64% opportunity share. That's really great. But I do see Jaylen Warren just eating into that bit by bit here. We can scroll down a little bit further and you can really see that's the case these last 2 weeks when we're taking a look at this. Now again, this dashboard right here, there is a minimum of 10 snaps per game. So if anybody, if there's a running back you're not seeing somewhere up here, it's because, sure, they might have played, but if they didn't play 10 offensive snaps, they're not going to pop up in here. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the backfield usage for Tennessee. Same sort of thing, 308 team snaps for the running backs, which ranks 31st, almost dead last in the NFL. That is worrisome. There's a much smaller pie for Tony Pollard here than there is for Najee Harris in Pittsburgh. We've got 446 team snaps for the running back, 10th most. Here you've got 308, 31st. That's a little worrisome. However, look at this. Pollard is getting 73% of the running back snaps. That's huge. 70% of the opportunity share. Week 7, he was the only dude. I mean, Tajee Spears is basically non-existent in this offense. It is all Tony Pollard. So, while the total team snaps might be less, disturbingly less almost at 30, ranking 31st, the fact that he's getting so much of that opportunity is huge. I mean, that's just really surprising, honestly, and probably unsustainable. And this tells you the same sort of thing. It is the Tony Pollard show when it comes to Tennessee. So last page I'm going to take a look at is our consistency collection. Basically, we are getting into just a little bit more in-depth in that consistency score. If I take a look, we got Tony Pollard right here, 3.25, and then Najee Harris at 19, 3.11. We can see both of them have 14% of their games as the top 12. Then Tony Pollard's 42% in the 13 to 24 range. Najee Harris is only 28%, worrisome. And then Tony Pollard 42% again, or 43% if we're rounding, 24 and above. Najee Harris 57% outside the top 24. That is a bit worrisome. But really what I wanted to do is I wanted to take a look at this graph because I think this graph is really important. If you notice, we got Tony Pollard here is that blue line. Najee Harris is the red line. Our running back 1 average is this black line right here, and running back 2 is the green one. Now, even though Tony Pollard has 42% in that quote-unquote top 24, which is 13 to 24 range, look at how close he is. Week 4, running back 1, 18.4. Tony Pollard, 17.8. He's just shy of it. Week 2, running back 1, 17. Tony Pollard, 15.2. This one, week 6, running back 1, 17.2, Tony Pollard 16.3. He's technically out of that RB1 average, but it is just right at the tail end of it, right? He is just below it. So we're talking about what, running back 13, maybe 14. Whereas if we're doing the same thing for Najee, you know, the running back 1's 14.9, 8.7, 8.8, 11.1, 8.4, 8.4. Najee is just so far below that, all except for these, you know, week 6, he hit the 19.2, and then week 7, he's just below it at 16.2. It's just a little worrisome that most of it is just so far below not only the RB1, but even the RB2 average. Now, again, if the targets take a real uptick in with Russell Wilson under center, that's going to be huge for Najee Harris. I really think that, you know, that would be the best way for him to truly break into that RB1 talk again. But other than that, I have to believe that Tony Pollard getting, you know, 70% of all the running back opportunities in Tennessee, even though there's less opportunities, that's just too big of a piece of that pie to pass up. And I'm leaning Tony Pollard right now, especially with the threat of Jaylen Warren coming back in, nipping at the opportunities from Najee Harris. And we've seen Jaylen Warren be a far more dynamic running back, especially in that passing game. So if Russell Wilson is dumping it off to Jaylen Warren, you know, 60, 70% of the time on those dump offs instead of Najee Harris, that's going to be a huge, huge hit on Najee Harris's value. So in my opinion, I would be going Tony Pollard over Najee Harris just slightly, but I really, really want to take a look at the average targets in the next couple weeks and see if that goes up with Russell Wilson. I lean Tony Pollard. I can be talked into Najee Harris down the road. All right, guys, if you like this, I hope you did. Please comment. Please share it with your friends. You don't know how much that does for us. It's huge. Again, feel free to follow me on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, Twix. That is Dumpster Dive FF on Twitter and Twix. Yeah, thank you very much.